The alarm never sounded. Marcus Hayes opened his eyes at 4:36 in the morning, 2 minutes before the phone on his nightstand would vibrate against the particle board. His body had learned to surrender sleep voluntarily 3 years ago, when grief taught him that rest was a luxury reserved for people whose worlds remained intact. He silenced the alarm before it could wake Isla down the hall, then sat up slowly, his spine cataloging every complaint his 34 years had accumulated. The apartment held that particular quiet of spaces too small for their occupants, where every breath and footfall pressed against thin walls. Marcus dressed in darkness, muscle memory guiding him through the ritual. Navy work shirt with his name embroidered above the pocket, matching pants, steel-toed boots that had cost him 2 paychecks but would last another year if he rotated the insoles monthly. He moved to the kitchen where 2 lunchboxes waited on the counter. Isla's featured a faded cartoon elephant she'd loved since she was 4 and refused to abandon even now at 7. His own was dented metal from a thrift store purchased the week after Rebecca died, when he realized buying lunch every day meant choosing between food and his daughter's medication. The coffee maker gurgled to life, filling the kitchen with a smell that had become synonymous with survival. Marcus measured instant coffee into a thermos, added powdered creamer that never quite dissolved, screwed the lid tight. In the refrigerator, carefully portioned meals waited in labeled containers. Tuesday breakfast, Tuesday lunch, Tuesday dinner. Everything planned, everything calculated, everything designed to stretch $68 across the next 5 days until his paycheck cleared. He'd done the math 3 times last night before bed. Rent was due Friday. He was $200 short. Isla's door opened with a whisper of hinges that needed oil. She lay curled beneath blankets printed with stars and moons. Her dark hair spilled across the pillow in tangles that would take 10 minutes to brush out. Her breathing came easy and unlabored, the nebulizer on her nightstand silent and unused for 4 nights running. Small victories counted when victories came so rarely. He knelt beside the bed, placing one hand gently on her shoulder. Her eyes opened slowly, focusing on his face with the gradual awareness of children still half lost in dreams. "Morning, baby girl." She stretched her small body, extending in that unself-conscious way children possess before the world teaches them to fold themselves smaller. "Is it a school day, school day?" Her face scrunched in theatrical displeasure, but she sat up, reaching for him with both arms. Marcus pulled her close, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo, feeling the steady beat of her heart against his chest. Moments like these formed the architecture of his entire existence. Everything else was scaffolding built to protect this. "What's for breakfast?" "The usual." She groaned but slid out of bed, padding toward the bathroom in bare feet. Marcus returned to the kitchen, placing 2 waffles in the toaster and measuring out her morning medication. The inhaler sat beside her juice glass, a constant reminder of fragility, of how quickly everything could collapse. The morning unfolded in its familiar choreography. Isla ate her waffles while Marcus braided her hair, her small voice narrating a dream about elephants who could fly and cities made of clouds. He listened with full attention, asking questions, laughing at her descriptions, storing away each detail in the part of his mind reserved for things that mattered most. At 6:45, they left the apartment, descending 3 flights of stairs because the elevator had been broken for 2 months and the landlord kept promising repairs that never materialized. The early morning air carried the bite of Seattle autumn, damp and gray, the kind of cold that worked its way through fabric and settled in bones. They walked 4 blocks to Ila's before-school program, housed in a community center that smelled of industrial cleaning products and microwave breakfast burritos. Other parents moved through the morning drop-off with varying degrees of consciousness. Marcus knew some of their faces, but few of their names. Parenthood had become a solitary occupation for him, the other adults forming natural partnerships and social groups while he remained perpetually outside the circle. Isla hugged him at the entrance, her arms tight around his waist. "Love you, Daddy. Love you more. Be good. I'm always good. That's my girl." He watched her disappear through the double doors, her backpack almost as large as her torso, and felt the familiar hollow ache of separation. Then he turned toward the bus stop, joining the flow of early morning workers whose wages didn't cover car insurance and parking fees. The number 45 arrived 12 minutes late, packed with the weary and the struggling people whose exhaustion showed in their posture and their silence. Marcus found a space near the rear exit, gripping the overhead rail as the bus lurched forward. Through the window, Seattle passed in a blur of coffee shops and construction sites, tech campuses and homeless encampments. A city that contained both obscene wealth and desperate poverty, often within the same city block. Apex Technologies occupied a 12-story glass and steel structure in the downtown corridor, its architecture designed to project innovation and transparency. Marcus swiped his employee badge at the service entrance, descending stairs to the basement level where maintenance staff began their shifts. The locker room smelled of industrial soap and old sweat. Metal lockers lined concrete walls painted an optimistic shade of yellow that had faded to something closer to resignation. Wendell Brooks was already suiting up, pulling his uniform shirt over a frame that suggested he'd once carried more weight. He and Marcus had started the same week 3 years ago. Two men grateful for jobs that came with health insurance and asked no questions about gaps in employment history. "You look like death. Thanks, you're pretty ugly yourself." Wendell grinned, the expression transforming his tired face into something younger. "I look good. 3 days without the nebulizer. 4 now, actually. That's great, man. Really great." Marcus stored his lunch in his locker and grabbed his equipment cart. The morning checklist waited on his phone. 3rd floor break room, 5th floor conference rooms, executive bathrooms on 12. 6 hours of emptying trash and scrubbing toilets and replacing paper towels, rendering himself invisible while making spaces pristine for people who would never acknowledge his existence. The basement corridor connected to a freight elevator that serviced all 12 floors. Marcus pushed his cart inside, pressing the button for 3. The elevator rose with mechanical groaning that suggested it shared his early morning reluctance. The doors opened onto a floor humming with low energy of people arriving for work, coffee in hand. Conversations already turning toward meetings and deadlines and deliverables. He moved through the break room with practiced efficiency, emptying trash bins filled with discarded coffee cups and protein bar wrappers. Crumbs scattered across the counter revealed someone's hurried breakfast. A spill near the coffee maker had already dried into sticky residue that required scraping with his fingernail. He cleaned it all without judgment or resentment. His mind elsewhere, running through Isla's schedule and calculating when he could afford to replace her shoes. By mid-morning, Marcus had worked his way to the 5th floor, a space dominated by glass-walled conference rooms where junior executives conducted meetings designed to prove their value to senior executives who rarely attended. He was refilling a paper towel dispenser when voices drifted from the nearest conference room. Words carrying clearly through walls built for aesthetics rather than privacy. "The maintenance costs are out of control. We're spending 30% more than comparable buildings our size." One voice, male and aggressive, dominated the discussion. "Where's the analysis on this?" A second voice, younger and uncertain, responded. "Facility says it's normal for a building this age. Normal doesn't mean acceptable. Get me a breakdown by category. I want to see where every dollar is going." Marcus finished with the dispenser and moved on, but the conversation lodged in his mind. 30% higher than comparable buildings. He thought about the floor buffers running on overlapping schedules, lights blazing in empty conference rooms throughout the night, HVAC systems maintaining full climate control on weekends when half the building sat vacant. He thought about inefficiency baked into every system, waste accepted as inevitable by people too busy managing up to notice what was happening at ground level. But he was a janitor. Nobody asked janitors about operational efficiency. The executive floor remained off-limits until afternoon, when most occupants attended meetings or lunches that justified expense accounts. Marcus waited until 1:30 before taking the freight elevator to 12, where the air itself seemed different, cleaner somehow, as if money bought better oxygen. The executive bathroom gleamed with fixtures that probably cost more than 3 months of his salary. He cleaned it anyway, scrubbing marble countertops and polishing chrome until he could see his reflection in every surface. The work was meditative in its repetition, requiring just enough attention to quiet the constant anxiety that formed the baseline hum of his existence. He was emptying the trash when the bathroom door opened. Footsteps clicked across marble, purposeful and certain. Marcus froze, suddenly aware of how his presence might be perceived. Men in positions of power didn't expect to find maintenance workers in executive spaces during business hours. He'd learned to make himself smaller in these moments, to demonstrate through posture and silence that he posed no threat, represented no disruption. The footsteps passed the stalls and stopped directly behind him. "Excuse me." The voice carried authority, softened by something that might have been genuine courtesy. Marcus turned slowly, finding himself face to face with a woman whose photograph hung in the lobby beside the company mission statement. Victoria Langford, CEO, 42 years old according to the business profiles he'd read in waiting rooms. In person, she looked younger and more tired, simultaneously her expression holding the careful neutrality of someone who'd learned to guard every reaction. "I'm almost finished. Just need another minute." "Take your time. I was actually hoping to ask you something." "The floor buffer on 7. It's been making a grinding noise for the past week. Do you know if someone has scheduled maintenance?" The question landed unexpectedly specific and practical rather than critical or dismissive. Marcus relaxed slightly, his professional knowledge overriding his social anxiety. "The belt needs replacing. I submitted a work order 5 days ago, but procurement hasn't approved the purchase yet." Victoria pulled out her phone, typing rapidly. "What's the part number?" Marcus recited it from memory, watching her send the message before returning the phone to her jacket pocket. "You'll have it by tomorrow morning." "Thank you." She studied him for a moment longer than necessary, her gaze direct, but not invasive. "You're Marcus, right? You started about 3 years ago." The fact that she knew his name created a disorientation he struggled to process. Executives didn't know maintenance staff names. They didn't notice individuals, only categories. "Yes, ma'am." Victoria's expression shifted slightly, something that might have been amusement or possibly annoyance crossing her features. "You don't have to call me ma'am. Victoria is fine." She left before he could formulate a response, her heels clicking back across marble and through the door that swung shut with pneumatic precision. Marcus stood alone in the pristine bathroom, his reflection multiplied in polished surfaces, trying to understand what had just occurred. The afternoon passed in its usual rhythm. More floors, more conference rooms, more spaces rendered clean and functional for occupants who would arrive tomorrow and expect nothing less than perfection. By 4:45, Marcus had completed his basic checklist and started on additional tasks that separated adequate employees from those who might eventually receive raises that outpaced inflation. He was in the main lobby, kneeling beside a coffee spill near the elevator bank, when the afternoon shift changed. The space filled with the flow of people leaving for day, executives and analysts and administrative staff, moving toward the exit in waves, their conversations turning from work to evening plans and weekend preparations. Marcus kept his head down, his mop tracing methodical circles across marble that cost more per square foot than his monthly rent. The executive elevator chimed its arrival. From his position on the floor, Marcus watched polished shoes emerge, recognizing the specific pattern of Victoria Langford's heels. Before his gaze traveled upward, she paused at the elevator threshold, scanning the lobby with practiced assessment of someone cataloging details others missed. Her eyes found him. The moment stretched longer than physics should have allowed. Marcus's hand stilled on the mop handle, suddenly conscious of the picture he presented. 34 years old, kneeling on expensive marble in a janitor's uniform, invisible to everyone except apparently the woman who owned the building. But Victoria didn't walk past. She walked toward him, her trajectory deliberate and unmistakable. People in the lobby began to notice conversations faltering as executives registered their CEO approaching maintenance staff with obvious purpose. Marcus started to stand, but she was already there, standing close enough that he could see the fine lines around her eyes. Evidence of stress and insufficient sleep that no amount of money seemed capable of erasing. Her voice came out barely above a whisper, as if she feared the volume of her own words. "I need to speak with you privately." "Not here. Can you come to my office, floor 12, room 1247? Now, please." She didn't wait for an answer, turning and walking toward the main exit, her departure creating a wake of stunned slunts. People stared after her, then at Marcus still kneeling beside his mop bucket, then back toward the elevator where she'd disappeared into the late afternoon light. Whispers began before Victoria had fully exited the building. Marcus heard fragments, pieces of speculation and judgment that would metastasize into narrative within hours. "Did you see that? What was she thinking? He's the janitor. Maybe it's some kind of corporate initiative. No way that was real." Marcus stood slowly, gripping the mop handle for stability. His face burned with a tension he'd spent 3 years avoiding. Every eye in the lobby was on him now, stripping away the invisibility that had been his primary survival strategy. He gathered his equipment with mechanical precision, muscle memory carrying him through actions his conscious mind had temporarily abandoned. Wendell appeared from somewhere, materializing beside Marcus with the timing of someone who'd been watching from a distance. "Did that just happen?" "I think so." His voice emerged rough, uncertain. "Man, you need to get out of here. People are already taking pictures." Wendell ran interference, physically placing himself between Marcus and the nearest camera-wielding witness. The basement locker room provided temporary sanctuary. Marcus sat on the bench in front of his locker, his hands trembling slightly as adrenaline finally caught up with shock. "This is crazy. This is absolutely insane." "I know." "What are you going to do?" Marcus pressed the heels of his hands against his eyes, trying to slow his racing thoughts. "She wants to see me." "Floor 12. Now." Wendell stopped pacing. "Are you going to go?" "I have to." "What choice do I have?" Marcus changed out of his uniform, pulling on jeans and a jacket that had seen better years. His phone buzzed with a text from Isla's after-school program reminding him of the 5:30 pickup time. Reality reasserted itself through the mundane necessity of parenting. Whatever had just happened in the lobby, whatever impossible situation he'd been thrust into, he still had a daughter who needed dinner and help with homework and bedtime stories. The freight elevator carried him back to 12, his stomach tight with anticipation of consequences. The executive suite felt different now that Victoria had singled him out publicly. The pristine carpets and expensive art seemed to mock his earlier intrusion. Victoria's office door stood open. She sat at her desk, still in her meeting clothes, but with her jacket removed, her expression unreadable. "Close the door." Marcus entered, his stomach tight with anticipation of consequences. Victoria stood, moving around the desk to lean against its front edge. Before she could speak, the office door burst open. 3 men entered without knocking. The first was Richard Caldwell, the CFO Marcus recognized from company town halls. Late 50s, expensive suit, the kind of confidence that came from never being told no. Behind him stood 2 security guards, their presence transforming the conversation from private to official. "Ms. Langford, I apologize for the interruption, but this can't wait." Richard's voice carried the smooth authority of someone used to controlling rooms. "We have a serious situation that requires immediate attention." Victoria's expression hardened. "Mr. Caldwell, I'm in the middle of a private conversation." "That's precisely what we need to discuss." Richard turned to Marcus, his smile not reaching his eyes. "Mr. Hayes, isn't it? I think it's best if you leave now. We'll have HR contact you about scheduling a meeting." Marcus looked at Victoria, trying to read permission in her face. She gave a small nod, frustration evident in the set of her jaw. "We'll talk later, I promise." Marcus moved toward the door, but Richard stepped into his path, close enough that Marcus had to angle his body sideways to pass. The message was clear. Know your place. The security guards followed Marcus to the elevator, their presence unnecessary but pointed. Neither spoke, but their silence carried its own weight. Marcus descended to the basement alone, collected his things, and left through the service entrance. The evening air felt colder than it had that morning, or maybe he'd just lost the insulation of routine. He rode the bus to Isla's program in a fog of confusion and dread. Other passengers filling the space around him, everyone absorbed in their own invisible struggles. Nobody aware that the man standing near the rear exit had just experienced something that made no sense within any framework he possessed for understanding the world. Isla bounced out of the community center with her usual excess of energy, chattering about a game they'd played involving dodgeballs and strategies she couldn't quite explain. Marcus listened with half his attention, the other half still trapped in that office moment, trying to decode what he'd seen in Victoria's face before Richard Caldwell turned everything into a power play. Dinner was leftover spaghetti reheated in the microwave, eaten at their small kitchen table while Isla narrated her entire day in exhaustive detail. She'd learned a new word in reading group. Trevor had gotten in trouble for throwing crayons. The drinking fountain near her classroom was broken again. Each detail arrived with the weight of crucial news, and Marcus received it all with the solemnity it deserved, because for Isla, these things constituted the full scope of existence. After dinner came the evening routine: homework, supervision, bath time, bedtime story selection. Isla chose the book about the elephant who wanted to be a knight, a story they'd read so many times Marcus could recite it from memory. He performed the voices anyway, giving the elephant a squeaky heroism and the dragon a booming menace. Watching Isla's eyes grow heavy as the familiar narrative worked its soporific magic. By 8:30 she was asleep, her breathing deep and steady, the nebulizer unused for a 5th consecutive night. Marcus sat on the edge of her bed for a long moment, studying her face in the dim glow of her nightlight. 7 years old, and already she'd survived so much. Her mother's death, their financial struggles, the constant uncertainty that permeated their lives like background radiation. She deserved better than what he could provide. She deserved stability and security, and a father who wasn't always one emergency away from complete collapse. He returned to the kitchen, his phone waiting on the counter where he'd left it charging. No messages from Victoria. No explanation for what had happened in her office. No clarity about why Richard Caldwell had interrupted with security guards in tow. Marcus made instant coffee and sat at the kitchen table, the apartment silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and distant traffic noise filtering through inadequate windows. The mailbox. He'd forgotten to check it after work. Marcus walked down 3 flights of stairs, his footsteps echoing in the stairwell. The metal mailbox yielded its usual collection of advertisements and bills. But one envelope stopped his breath. Red ink. Final notice. Final. He opened it, standing in the building's dimly lit lobby, reading by the light of a fluorescent fixture that buzzed overhead. Outstanding balance: $347, late fee $50, total due $397. Failure to pay within 7 days will result in account being sent to collections. This may affect your credit score and ability to secure future medical services. The bill was from Isla's emergency room visit 6 months ago, when her asthma attack had been severe enough to warrant an ambulance. Insurance had covered most of it, but their deductible meant they owed the remainder. Marcus had been making small payments, $20 here, $30 there, whatever he could scrape together. But he'd missed the last 2 months while paying for new school supplies and winter clothes Isla had outgrown. 7 days. He had 7 days to find nearly $400 or risk collections, which meant higher interest, which meant the debt would only grow, which meant choosing between this bill and next month's rent. The arithmetic of poverty was simple and merciless. There were never enough resources to cover all necessities simultaneously. You triaged, constantly deciding which crisis deserved immediate attention while others festered. Marcus climbed back to his apartment, envelope clutched in his hand, like an indictment. He sat at the kitchen table and opened his laptop, logging into his bank account with the grim certainty of someone checking the damage after a natural disaster. Checking balance: $68.43. Savings balance $0. Credit card 1 maxed at $1,500. Credit card 2 maxed at $1,000. Credit card 3. $217 available credit, but the interest rate was 24%, which meant borrowing $400 would cost him closer to $500 by the time he paid it off. He could ask Wendell for a loan, but Wendell had 3 kids and his own financial tightrope to walk. He could try to pick up extra shifts, but overtime required manager approval, and his manager had already warned that the budget was tight. He could sell something, but he owned nothing of value beyond his laptop and phone, both of which he needed for work and managing Isla's school communications. He could skip meals, but he'd already cut his food budget to the bone, and malnutrition would only make him less effective at work, which risked the job that kept them housed and insured. The walls of the apartment seemed to press inward, the space shrinking with each impossible calculation. This was the reality of being poor in America, not the romanticized struggle of movie characters who prevailed through grit and determination, but the grinding, soul-crushing mathematics of never having enough, of watching opportunities slip away because you couldn't afford the entry fee, of knowing that one unexpected expense could topple the entire precarious structure you'd built. Marcus thought about Rebecca, about the life they'd planned before cancer revealed plans to be suggestions rather than guarantees. She'd possessed practical wisdom about people and their motivations, a detector so finely calibrated she could assess character within minutes. What would she say about this moment, about the medical bill and Victoria Langford and Richard Caldwell's interruption? The question had no answer, but asking it helped clarify his own thinking. His phone buzzed, startling him from spiral. Unknown number. Marcus stared at the screen, thumb hovering over the decline button before some impulse he couldn't name made him accept. Mr. Hayes. This is Richard Caldwell. I believe we need to have a conversation about this afternoon's incident. The voice was smooth, professional, carrying undertones of threat wrapped in courtesy. I'm calling as a concerned member of Apex's leadership team. What happened today in Ms. Langford's office and before that in the lobby has created a situation that requires careful management. Marcus said, nothing waiting. I want to be clear that we at Apex value all our employees equally, but there are protocols, boundaries that exist for good reason. A CEO doesn't summon maintenance staff to her office for private meetings. It creates appearance of impropriety, raises questions about judgment and professionalism. Richard paused, letting the implications settle. I'm not suggesting anything inappropriate occurred, but appearances matter, especially in our current climate. A black man alone in a white female executive's office, door closed. I'm sure you understand how that might be perceived. The words landed like acid, burning through Marcus's already frayed composure. For a black man in corporate America, this moment is career death. The thought had formed instinctively when he'd walked in on Victoria that morning, a survival reflex honed by years of navigating spaces where his presence was tolerated but never fully accepted. Now Richard was weaponizing that same fear, using racial dynamics as cudgel to enforce compliance. What do you want? I want to help you, Mr. Hayes. I want to help both you and Ms. Langford avoid an unfortunate situation. Here's what I propose. You submit a voluntary resignation effective immediately. We'll provide 2 months severance pay, continuation of health insurance through the end of the year, and a neutral employment reference. In exchange, you sign a confidentiality agreement stating you won't discuss any interactions with Ms. Langford or any other Apex personnel. Clean break, no hard feelings, everyone moves forward. And if I don't agree, Richard's sigh carried performative sympathy, then I'll be forced to recommend that HR conduct a full investigation into today's incidents. Security footage will be reviewed, witnesses will be interviewed, the media may become involved. These things have a way of getting messy, Mr. Hayes. Allegations fly, reputations suffer, legal bills mount. Even when someone is ultimately cleared, the stain remains. Is that really what you want for yourself? For your daughter? The mention of Isla sent ice through Marcus's veins. How do you know about my daughter? This is a small company in many ways. People talk. I understand you're a single father, that your wife passed away several years ago. Tragic, and I understand your daughter has health issues. Asthma, correct, requires expensive medication, regular monitoring. Losing your health insurance would be catastrophic for her care. Richard let the threat hang in the air, unspoken but crystal clear. So let me ask you plainly, what's more important, your pride or your daughter's health? Marcus gripped the phone so hard his knuckles ached. I need time to think. You have until 9 tomorrow morning. That's when I present my findings to the executive committee. Make the smart choice, Mr. Hayes, for Isla's sake. The line went dead. Marcus sat in his kitchen, staring at the phone in his hand, feeling the walls close in further. Richard Caldwell had just laid out the architecture of his destruction with professional precision. Resign voluntarily and lose income, but keep insurance temporarily, or refuse and face investigation that would likely end with termination anyway, plus the added bonus of public scandal and unemployability. Either path led to ruin. The only difference was speed. He thought about Victoria's face in her office, the way she'd looked at him with something that might have been recognition or respect. Then he thought about Richard's interruption, the security guards, the implication that Marcus's presence in that space was inherently suspicious. The message was clear. Know your place, don't reach above your station, accept the limits society has drawn around you. Marcus opened his laptop again, this time searching for something he barely dared to hope existed. St. Mary's Pharmacy, Seattle, prescriptions 2021. The search returned generic results about the pharmacy's services and hours. He refined it. St. Mary's Pharmacy, March 15, 2021. Still nothing useful. He tried a different approach, searching for Victoria Langford's father instead. Thomas Langford, death, March 2021, Seattle. The obituary loaded on his screen. Thomas Langford, 73, founder and former CEO of Apex Technologies, died March 15, 2021 at St. Mary's Hospital following sudden cardiac arrest. He is survived by his daughter, Victoria Langford, current CEO of Apex Technologies. Services private. In lieu of flowers, donations may be made to the American Heart Association. Marcus checked the timestamp. Article published March 16, 2021 at 6:14 a.m. He searched deeper, finding a news article about the death. Tech pioneer Thomas Langford dies suddenly. The piece included more details. Langford had been admitted to St. Mary's emergency room at 9:23 p.m. on March 15th, complaining of chest pain. He died at 10:47 p.m. despite resuscitation efforts. He was pronounced dead in the emergency department with his daughter, Victoria Langford, at his side. Marcus opened his kitchen cabinet and retrieved the small box where he kept important documents. Birth certificates, social security cards, Rebecca's death certificate. And beneath those, Isla's medical records. He found the prescription bottle from 3 years ago, holding it up to the light. The label was faded but legible. Isla Hayes, albuterol inhaler, 90 mcg, prescribed 03/15/2021, filled 03/15/2021, 11:17 p.m., St. Mary's Pharmacy. The timeline assembled itself with crystalline clarity. Thomas Langford died at 10:47 p.m. Victoria would have been devastated, likely staying at the hospital to handle paperwork and notifications. The hospital and pharmacy were connected, part of the same medical complex. She must have needed something, a prescription for herself perhaps. Or maybe just walking in shock, moving through motions while her brain tried to process the impossible. And at 11:03 p.m. she encountered Marcus begging a pharmacist to let him buy an inhaler he couldn't afford for his daughter who couldn't breathe. Marcus remembered that night with painful clarity. Isla's nebulizer had broken that afternoon. She'd been fine initially, but by evening her breathing grew labored. He'd called the advice nurse, who said to monitor her, but by 10:30 her lips had a faint blue tinge and she couldn't finish sentences. He'd scooped her up and run 4 blocks to the emergency room where they stabilized her with a breathing treatment and prescribed a new inhaler. But the inhaler cost $287 and his credit cards wouldn't clear, and the pharmacist was apologetic but firm. No payment, no medication. Then a woman had appeared, professional clothes, slightly disheveled eyes red from crying, moving with the mechanical precision of someone operating on autopilot. She'd heard Marcus's increasingly desperate pleas and stepped forward without hesitation. "I'll pay for it." Her card went through instantly. She'd left before Marcus could properly thank her, disappearing back toward the hospital wing. That woman had been Victoria Langford. She'd just lost her father, was likely in shock, definitely grieving. But she'd heard Marcus's fear and recognized something in it, some universal terror of losing someone you loved. And she'd acted without expectation of recognition or repayment, simply because she could help and he needed help. Marcus set the prescription bottle on the table, staring at it like an artifact from another life. Victoria Langford had saved Isla's life that night. And now, 3 years later, Richard Caldwell was trying to use Marcus as a weapon to destroy her. The scandal, the security guards, the ultimatum. None of it was about protecting company protocol. It was about power and control and removing obstacles. His phone buzzed again. Another unknown number, but this time a text message. "Resign or tomorrow your daughter sees Daddy on the news. Think about Isla." No signature, but the threat was clear. Someone had escalated from phone call to direct intimidation. Someone wanted him gone badly enough to invoke his daughter by name. Marcus thought about Rebecca, about the promise he'd made at her funeral. Keep Isla safe. Keep fighting. Don't give up. He thought about the medical bill sitting on his counter, the eviction notice that would come if he couldn't make rent, the systematic dismantling of every small security he'd managed to build. He thought about Victoria Langford standing in a pharmacy at midnight paying for a stranger's medication because she understood that some moments transcended money and status and all the artificial hierarchies humans constructed. And he made a decision that was either the bravest or stupidest thing he'd ever done. He wasn't going to resign. He wasn't going to disappear quietly into the night like Richard Caldwell expected. He was going to show up tomorrow morning, walk to floor 12, and tell Victoria Langford exactly who he was and what she'd done 3 years ago. He was going to trust that the woman who'd saved his daughter possessed enough integrity to help him now. It was a gamble with stakes he couldn't afford to lose. But sometimes the only choice was between types of ruin, and he'd rather fall while standing than survive on his knees. Marcus set his alarm for 4:38, the same time as always. Tomorrow would begin like every other day, with darkness and instant coffee, and the ritual of preparing for another shift. But underneath the routine, everything had changed. He'd crossed a threshold he couldn't uncross, stepped into territory where his presence challenged the natural order of things. For a black man in corporate America, that kind of defiance came with consequences. He just had to hope Victoria Langford remembered the night she'd saved a little girl's life, and that she understood that debt worked both ways. Marcus arrived at Apex Technologies at 6:45 minutes before his shift officially began. The building stood dark except for security lighting and the glow of emergency exit signs visible through ground floor windows. He bypassed the service entrance, heading instead for the main lobby where executives accessed the tower. His badge worked on the reader, granting access he technically possessed but rarely used. The marble floor he'd mopped yesterday now stretched empty and pristine, his reflection catching in its surface as he crossed toward the elevator bank. Floor 12. He pressed the button and watched the numbers climb, his heart rate accelerating with each passing floor. The executive suite lay silent, most offices still dark. But light spilled from beneath Victoria Langford's door at the corridor's end. Marcus walked toward it, each step feeling like crossing territory he had no right to occupy. He knocked twice, firm but not aggressive. "Come in." Victoria sat at her desk, still wearing yesterday's clothes, or perhaps she'd never left. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. Papers covered every surface and her laptop glowed with what appeared to be financial spreadsheets. She looked up as Marcus entered, surprise flickering across her face before settling into something harder to read. "You're here early. I need to talk to you, before Richard Caldwell makes his move." Marcus closed the door, despite every instinct screaming that a closed door with Victoria Langford would only make things worse. But some conversations required privacy, and this one would determine whether he still had a job by noon. Victoria gestured to the chair across from her desk. "Sit, please." Marcus lowered himself into leather that probably cost more than his monthly rent. The office smelled of coffee and something floral, an air freshener, or perhaps Victoria's perfume. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows behind her, Seattle's skyline emerged from darkness as dawn approached. "Richard called me last night. Told me I have until 9 this morning to resign voluntarily or face investigation for..." He paused, trying to find words that wouldn't sound absurd. "Inappropriate conduct with you." Victoria's jaw tightened. "He called you directly at home on my cell. He knew about Isla, knew about her asthma, threatened that losing health insurance would be catastrophic for her care." Marcus pulled out his phone, navigating to the call log. "Then I got a text from another number. Anonymous. Told me to resign or my daughter would see me on the news. Show me." Victoria extended her hand. Marcus passed her the phone. She read the text message, her expression darkening with each word. "This is harassment, intimidation. We can file charges against who we don't know who sent it, and Richard would deny making threats. It would be my word against a CFO's." Marcus leaned back, exhaustion making his movements heavy. "For a black man in corporate America, that's not a fight I win. The system's designed to protect people like him, not people like me." Victoria set the phone down carefully as if it might detonate. "I watched the security footage from yesterday morning. All of it. You knocked on my office door twice. The door was ajar because the electronic lock malfunctioned. You entered respectfully, backed out immediately when you realized your mistake, apologized. There was zero inappropriate conduct. I know that. You know that. But Richard's betting that optics matter more than truth. Black maintenance worker, white female CEO, closed office door. Even if I'm cleared, the accusation sticks. I become unemployable." Victoria stood pacing to the windows. Outside, the city continued its slow awakening, cars beginning to populate streets, lights flickering on in distant buildings. She pressed one hand against the glass, her breath fogging the surface. "I need to tell you something. About 3 years ago, March 15th specifically." Marcus's pulse quickened. He'd rehearsed this conversation in his head all night, but hearing Victoria approach the topic voluntarily changed the dynamic entirely. "My father died that night, at St. Mary's Hospital. Cardiac arrest. He was 73 but healthy, active. It came without warning." Victoria's reflection in the window showed her eyes closing briefly. "I was with him when he died. Held his hand while machines failed to restart his heart. Afterward, I had to handle paperwork, notifications, 1,000 details that feel absurd when someone you love just stopped existing." She turned to face Marcus, her composure cracking at the edges. "I went to the hospital pharmacy around 11. Needed something, I don't even remember what, and I heard a man begging, 'Please, my daughter can't breathe. I don't have the money, but I'll pay you back. I swear I'll pay you back. Just please.'" Marcus felt his throat constrict. "That was me. I know. I looked at you and saw someone fighting to save his child while I'd just lost my father. The universe felt cruel and random and completely indifferent. But I could do something about your crisis even if I couldn't change mine. So I paid. $287. Easier than breathing for someone with my resources." The office held them both in silence for 10 seconds. Marcus struggled to organize thoughts that refused to arrange themselves logically. "You saved Isla's life that night. The inhaler kept her stable until morning when we could get her regular doctor. If she'd gone another hour without it, she would have needed hospitalization, possibly intensive care. I didn't save anyone. I just helped a parent who needed help." Victoria returned to her desk but didn't sit, instead leaning against its edge. But now I understand why Richard is pushing so hard. He's not protecting the company, he's protecting himself. What do you mean quarterly audit starts Monday? Board reviews all major expenditures for the past 18 months. Richard handles vendor contracts, approves consulting agreements, manages facilities budgets. If someone were embezzling, they'd need to keep leadership distracted during audit period. Victoria pulled up a document on her laptop, rotating the screen so Marcus could see. I've been reviewing contracts since midnight. There are anomalies, large payments to consulting firms I've never heard of. Marcus stood, moving around the desk to examine the spreadsheet. His maintenance work had taught him to spot patterns, inefficiencies, problems hiding in plain sight. The numbers told a story if you knew how to read them. Quantum Consulting, $2.4 million for strategic services. What services exactly? Victoria opened another file. The contract is vague. Strategic advisory on operational efficiency. But there's no deliverables listed, no timeline, no measurable outcomes. It's essentially $2.4 million for consulting that may never have occurred. Nexus Dynamics, $3.1 million for digital transformation. Marcus scrolled down. Same problem, no specifics. And Pinnacle Solutions, $4.8 million for operational excellence. Victoria's voice carried bitter recognition of her own blindness. I signed off on these. Richard presented them as necessary investments, time-sensitive opportunities. I trusted his judgment because I was focused on product development and market expansion. $10.3 million total. Marcus did the calculation automatically. Over 18 months. That's nearly $600,000 per month flowing to companies that might not exist. Victoria opened a new browser window, typing rapidly. I've been searching corporate registries. All 3 companies share the same registered agent in Delaware, a lawyer named Thomas Blackwood. Marcus watched as she pulled up another document. Thomas Blackwood is Richard Caldwell's nephew. Changed his last name legally 10 years ago, possibly to obscure the family connection. So Richard created shell companies, funneled Apex money through them, and pocketed the difference. Marcus understood the mechanics immediately. Classic embezzlement scheme. But he needed distraction to keep the board from looking too closely at vendor contracts during audit, and I handed him the perfect distraction yesterday morning when you accidentally entered my office. Victoria's expression hardened. He escalated it deliberately. Security guards, threats, media implications. He wants me focused on defending you and myself instead of reviewing his contracts. The door opened without warning. Wendell Brooks entered carrying a messenger bag, surprise registering when he saw Marcus. Bro, what are you doing here? I thought you might not come in today after that phone call. You knew about the call. I was outside your apartment around 9:30. Brought you some groceries, figured you could use the help. Heard you on the phone through the door. Wendell set the bag on Victoria's desk. Sounded like someone was threatening you about Isla. Couldn't just let that slide. Victoria extended her hand. Ms. Langford, I know you're friends with Marcus. Wendell Brooks, maintenance crew, same as Marcus. Wendell shook her hand, then addressed Marcus directly. After you got off the phone, I did some digging. Called in a favor from my cousin who works building security. Got access to the system logs. What kind of access? The kind that shows who touched what settings and when. Wendell pulled out a tablet from his messenger bag, navigating to a spreadsheet. Yesterday morning, 7:45 a.m. Richard Caldwell's executive assistant, a woman named Patricia Fleming, accessed the Floor 12 security system. She changed the electronic lock settings on your office door. He pointed at Victoria. Set it to show locked on the monitoring panel, but actually left it unlatched, so Marcus would think it was a supply closet. Victoria's voice dropped to something cold and precise. Richard engineered the encounter. Gets worse. Wendell swiped to another screen. Patricia also accessed the building's internal communication system. At 7:43 a.m., she sent a text message to Marcus's work phone. Only the message never arrived because she immediately deleted it from the server. But the log shows the attempt. What did the message say? According to the metadata backup, and Wendell read from his tablet, it said, Floor 12 supply closet needs immediate attention. Water leak in room 1247. Please address before executive arrivals. Marcus never got the message, but the system logged that he was scheduled to receive it. Creates plausible deniability. He set me up. Marcus felt fury building in his chest, hot and corrosive. Richard Caldwell deliberately created a scenario where I would walk in on you, then use the incident to threaten my job and my daughter's health care. Victoria picked up her office phone, dialing a 3-digit extension. Janet, this is Victoria Langford. I need you in my office immediately. Yes, now, and bring David Stern. Her tone left no room for negotiation. She hung up and turned to Marcus and Wendell. What you've found is evidence of conspiracy and harassment, but we need to be careful about how we present it. Why Wendell's confusion was evident. This proves Richard's guilty. Evidence obtained through unauthorized system access is inadmissible. Victoria's legal training showed in her phrasing. If we present this to the board, Richard's lawyers will argue it was illegally gathered. We need him to confess, or we need a legitimate witness. The door opened again. Janet Pierce entered. The HR director Marcus had met yesterday during his interrogation. Behind her came David Stern, the company lawyer who'd asked probing questions about his relationship with Victoria. Both stopped short, seeing Marcus and Wendell in Victoria's office so early. Ms. Langford, what's this about? Sit down, both of you. Victoria's command left no ambiguity about who controlled the room. Janet and David took seats, exchanging uncertain glances. Yesterday morning, Marcus Hayes entered my office by accident because the door was unlocked due to malfunction. I've reviewed security footage. His conduct was entirely appropriate. The incident should never have escalated to HR investigation. Janet shifted uncomfortably. We were following protocol for any situation involving potential harassment claims. Who told you to follow that protocol? Victoria leaned forward. Because I explicitly told you Marcus did nothing wrong, yet you offered him a transfer to night shift and implied he should sign a confidentiality agreement. Why would you pressure someone who was clearly innocent? David Stern interjected, his lawyer instincts activating. We were protecting the company from liability. If any accusation were made public, having documentation of our response would demonstrate due diligence. Accusation from whom? I'm the supposed victim, and I said no accusation was warranted. Victoria pulled up the email chain on her laptop, rotating it so Janet and David could read. Yet within 2 hours of the incident, Richard Caldwell emailed both of you with specific instructions about how to handle Marcus Hayes. He referenced legal exposure, racial sensitivity, and recommended immediate administrative leave pending full investigation. Janet's face paled. Mr. Caldwell is CFO. He has authority to raise concerns about corporate risk. He has no authority to override the CEO's explicit statement that no misconduct occurred. Victoria stood, her posture radiating controlled anger. And last night, Richard called Marcus at home, threatened his daughter's health care, and pressured him to resign. That's witness intimidation, and it's illegal. David Stern's expression shifted from defensive to alarmed. Do you have evidence of this contact? Marcus pulled out his phone, playing the voicemail Richard had left after the initial call. The CFO's voice filled the office, smooth and threatening in equal measure. Make the smart choice, Mr. Hayes, for Isla's sake. When it finished, Wendell pulled up the security logs on his tablet. And here's evidence that Richard's assistant manipulated building systems to engineer the encounter in the first place. Wendell displayed the timestamps, the access records, the deleted message meant to lure Marcus to Victoria's office. Janet Pierce looked like she might be sick. This is conspiracy, criminal conspiracy. The office phone rang. Victoria answered with clipped efficiency. Yes, a pause. Tell him I'm in a meeting. Another pause. No, tell Richard Caldwell specifically that I will not see him until the board meeting at 9 a.m. She hung up and checked her watch. 6:53. We have 2 hours and 7 minutes to build an airtight case. David, I need you to prepare a report for the board documenting everything we've discussed. Janet. You're going to review every interaction HR had with Marcus Hayes and prepare a statement acknowledging that company policy was manipulated. What about the embezzlement? Marcus gestured at the spreadsheet still glowing on Victoria's laptop. 10 million in fraudulent contracts. Victoria's expression turned predatory. That's the leverage. Richard thinks he's controlling the narrative with the harassment angle. He doesn't know we've found his financial crimes. We let him walk into the board meeting confident, let him make his accusations, then destroy him with evidence he didn't see coming. That's risky. David Stern pulled out his own laptop, already drafting documents. If he suspects you're on to the embezzlement, he might destroy records or flee. He won't flee. Victoria's certainty was absolute. Richard Caldwell is arrogant. He thinks he's the smartest person in every room. That arrogance makes him predictable. Marcus's phone buzzed. Text message from Isla's school. Emergency contact notification, Isla Hayes experiencing respiratory distress. Please respond immediately. His heart stopped. The text had arrived at 6:41, 12 minutes ago. I have to go. Marcus was already moving toward the door. Isla's having an attack. Go. Victoria grabbed her car keys from her desk drawer. I'll drive. We'll be faster than calling an ambulance. The three of them ran for the elevator, Marcus jabbing the button repeatedly as if frequency could summon the car faster. The descent felt interminable, floors ticking by with mechanical indifference, while his daughter struggled to breathe miles away. Victoria's BMW sat in the executive parking garage, a silver sedan that probably cost more than Marcus would earn in 3 years. He climbed into the passenger seat without questioning the arrangement, his mind entirely focused on Isla. Victoria drove with controlled aggression, navigating morning traffic with the precision of someone who understood that ruse bent for emergencies. She ran 2 yellow lights and took corners faster than safety recommended, but never recklessly enough to cause an accident. Marcus called the school, his hands shaking as he held the phone. This is Marcus Hayes. I got the notification about Isla. What's her status? The school nurse's voice carried practiced calm. She's stable but labored breathing. I've administered her emergency inhaler, but she needs medical evaluation. Can you get here soon? 5 minutes. Marcus ended the call and dialed Wendell. Can you cover my shift? Already on it, bro. Take care of your girl. The elementary school materialized ahead, a low brick building surrounded by temporary classrooms and playground equipment. Victoria pulled into the drop-off zone, ignoring signs about visitor parking. Marcus was out before the car fully stopped, sprinting toward the main entrance. The receptionist waved him through without checking ID, and he followed the familiar path to the nurse's office. Isla sat on the examination table, her nebulizer mask strapped across her face, medication misting with each labored breath. Her eyes found Marcus and tears spilled over, relief and fear mixing on her 7-year-old face. He pulled her into his arms, careful not to dislodge the mask, feeling her small body shake with the effort of breathing. You're okay, baby girl. Daddy's here. You're okay. The nurse consulted her clipboard. Attack came on suddenly during morning assembly. She said her chest felt tight, started wheezing. I got her here immediately and started the nebulizer. She's responding, but I'd recommend follow-up with her regular doctor today. I'll take her now. Marcus looked at the nebulizer. How much longer on this treatment? Another 5 minutes. Then she should be clear to transport. The office door opened. Victoria entered, slightly out of breath from running after Marcus. She stopped when she saw Isla, her expression shifting to concern. Is she all right? Isla's eyes widened above the nebulizer mask, recognition flashing despite her distress. The nurse looked between Victoria and Marcus, clearly trying to understand the relationship dynamic. This is Marcus hesitated, searching for words that wouldn't require explanation. A friend. She drove me here. Victoria knelt beside the examination table, bringing herself to Isla's eye level. Hi, I'm Victoria. Your dad told me you weren't feeling well. She reached out slowly, giving Isla time to pull away if she wanted. Isla instead grabbed Victoria's hand, holding it tight. Asthma is scary, but the medicine helps, right? Victoria's voice carried gentle authority. "You're already breathing better than when your dad got here." Isla nodded, her grip on Victoria's hand, not loosening. The nebulizer continued its work, medication turning to mist and then to easier breathing. Marcus watched his daughter hold hands with a woman she'd met 30 seconds ago, watched Victoria speak to her with genuine care rather than obligation or performance. Something in his chest unclenched slightly. The nurse's timer beeped. "Treatment complete." She removed the mask from Isla's face. "How do you feel, sweetheart? Better?" Isla's voice came out hoarse but stronger. "Can I go home? Let's let your dad decide." The nurse handed Marcus a printed sheet. "Instructions for follow-up care. If breathing worsens, go to emergency room. Otherwise, see her regular doctor within 24 hours. Marcus signed the release form and helped Isla off the examination table. She insisted on walking her pride intact despite the medical crisis. But she kept hold of Victoria's hand, and Victoria didn't let go. They walked to the car together, Marcus carrying Isla's backpack. Victoria carrying Isla's unspoken trust like it was made of glass. The drive back was slower, less urgent. Isla sat in the back seat watching Victoria with open curiosity that made Marcus simultaneously grateful and anxious. His daughter was mapping new territory, building relationships he couldn't control or predict. If Victoria disappeared from their lives tomorrow, Isla would have to process that loss on top of everything else she'd already survived. "Where do you live?" Victoria asked as she navigated residential streets. Marcus gave directions to his apartment. Victoria didn't comment on the neighborhood or the building's visible decay. She parked in the visitor space and helped Isla out of the car without being asked. They climbed 3 flights of stairs together, Isla moving slowly but steadily. Marcus unlocked the apartment, suddenly conscious of how small and shabby it must appear to someone who lived in a penthouse. But Victoria entered without hesitation, her attention focused entirely on Isla. "Where's your room? Let's get you settled." Isla led Victoria down the short hallway to her bedroom. Marcus followed, watching Victoria help Isla onto the bed, adjust pillows, pull the elephant print blanket up to her chin. She moved with practiced efficiency as if she'd done this before for someone else. "You should rest now. Your body worked hard this morning." Victoria brushed hair back from Isla's forehead. "Your dad's going to stay home and take care of you. Are you staying too?" Isla's question held hope and uncertainty in equal measure. Victoria glanced at Marcus, seeking permission. He nodded, unable to articulate why this felt important beyond logic. "I can stay for a little while." Victoria sat on the edge of the bed. "Want to tell me about those elephants?" Isla launched into explanation of her elephant collection, pointing to stuffed animals arranged on shelves and drawings taped to walls. Victoria listened with full attention, asking questions that showed genuine interest rather than polite tolerance. Marcus stood in the doorway, watching his daughter forget her fear. Watching Victoria dismantle her own careful boundaries, watching two people who shouldn't connect finding common ground anyway. His phone buzzed. Text from Wendell. "You good?" Marcus stepped into the kitchen to respond. "Isla's stable, home now, thanks for covering." Another text arrived immediately, this one from an unknown number. "Board meeting moved to 7 p.m. Richard wants more time to build his case. You're requested to attend. Do not come, it won't be safe." Marcus stared at the message. Richard Caldwell had just tipped his hand. Moving the meeting gave him time to orchestrate something worse than threats. The harassment angle wasn't working, so he'd escalate to something more damaging. Marcus needed to warn Victoria, but she was currently reading a book about flying elephants to his daughter in a voice that suggested she'd done bedtime stories before. He walked back to Isla's room. Victoria looked up from the book, immediately registering distress in his face. "What happened?" "Board meeting moved to 7 p.m. tonight. Someone just texted me not to come." Victoria's jaw set. "Who texted you?" "Unknown number." Marcus showed her the screen. "But it's clearly from someone who knows about the meeting change. That was supposed to be confidential." Victoria carefully closed the book and stood. Only board members and executive staff would know. Isla yawned her earlier attack, leaving her exhausted. "Daddy, I'm sleepy." "Then sleep, baby girl. I'll be right here." Marcus kissed her forehead. Victoria moved toward the door, but Isla's voice stopped her. "Ms. Victoria, will you come back? If your dad says it's okay, I will." Isla looked at Marcus with an expression far too knowing for 7 years old. "I like her, Daddy. She's nice. I like her too, baby." Marcus felt the truth of the statement settle over him. "Go to sleep now." Isla's eyes drifted closed, exhaustion claiming her quickly. Marcus and Victoria moved to the kitchen where they could speak without waking her. Victoria leaned against the counter, her professional facade beginning to crack. "I've spent years avoiding exactly this. Getting involved, caring about people beyond professional relationships. It's safer to stay isolated." "What changed? You did. The pharmacy 3 years ago. I saw you fighting for your daughter, and it reminded me that money means nothing if you're not using it to help people." Victoria met his eyes. "Then yesterday you walked into my office and I realized I'd been noticing you for years. The way you work with dignity even when no one's watching. The way you never cut corners, the way you're invisible to everyone, but I kept seeing you." Marcus moved closer, drawn by vulnerability he hadn't expected from someone so carefully guarded. "I'm still a janitor, still broke, still one crisis away from losing everything, and I'm still CEO, still lonely, still terrified that everyone in my life wants something from me except you who wants nothing." Victoria's voice dropped to whisper. "So what do we do about that?" "We figure out if this is real or just two isolated people grabbing at connection." Marcus reached for her hand. "And we survived tonight's board meeting first." Victoria squeezed his hand, then pulled away reluctantly. "I need to prepare. Richard's going to come at us with everything. We need ironclad documentation and witnesses who can't be intimidated. I'll call Eleanor Frost, the private investigator I've used before. If Richard has offshore accounts, she'll find them." The afternoon passed in strategic preparation. Victoria coordinated with her lawyer, ensuring protections in place if the board meeting went sideways. Marcus reviewed Wendell's security evidence, organizing it into narrative that made Richard's conspiracy undeniable. Eleanor Frost called at 3:45 with preliminary findings that confirmed their suspicions. Richard Caldwell had 6 offshore accounts containing nearly $10 million. By 6 p.m. they were ready. Marcus had arranged for Isla to stay with Wendell's family. Victoria had assembled a presentation that would systematically destroy Richard's credibility. They drove to Apex Technologies together, neither speaking much, both understanding that the next few hours would determine whether Marcus kept his job and Victoria kept her company. The boardroom was already occupied when they arrived at 6:52. 18 seats arranged around a massive table, 11 currently filled with board members reviewing documents. Richard Caldwell sat at the table's head, his posture radiating confidence. He smiled when Victoria entered, a predator's expression. "Victoria, thank you for being punctual. I know this has been difficult." His eyes slid to Marcus, standing behind her. "Mr. Hayes, I'm surprised to see you here. Mr. Hayes is here at my request." Victoria took her seat at the opposite end of the table from Richard. "He has relevant testimony to provide. I'm afraid that's not possible." Richard's smile didn't waver. "This is a closed board session. Only board members and designated counsel may attend. Then it's fortunate that David Stern is already present." Victoria gestured to the company lawyer sitting 3 seats down. "And I've invited my personal attorney, James Morrison, to observe." James entered the boardroom precisely on cue, carrying a briefcase and the air of someone who billed $600 per hour. Richard's expression flickered with annoyance before resetting to neutral. "Very well. Let's begin. As you know, I've called this meeting to address serious concerns about Ms. Langford's judgment and conduct over the past several days." "Actually," Victoria interrupted, "I've called this meeting to address serious concerns about your judgment and conduct over the past 18 months. The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Richard's mask cracked slightly, revealing calculation behind courtesy. I'm not sure what you mean. Then let me clarify. Victoria opened her laptop, pulling up the first slide of a presentation that must have taken her hours to prepare. Over the past 18 months, Apex Technologies has paid $10.3 million to three consulting firms: Quantum Consulting, Nexus Dynamics, and Pinnacle Solutions. All three were contracted at your recommendation, approved by you, and paid through accounts you control. Those were legitimate business expenses, strategic investments in operational efficiency and digital transformation. Really? Because I've reviewed the contracts. There are no deliverables specified, no timeline for completion, no measurable outcomes. The presentation advanced to show contract excerpts side by side. These aren't consulting agreements. They're blank checks. Richard's attorney leaned over to whisper something, but Richard waved him off. The specifics were confidential. Market-sensitive information that couldn't be documented in standard contract language. Then perhaps you can explain why all three consulting firms share the same registered agent. Victoria clicked to the next slide, showing corporate registration documents. Thomas Blackwood. Your nephew serves as registered agent for entities that have collectively received $10.3 million from this company. The boardroom erupted. Multiple members began speaking simultaneously, questions overlapping into chaos. Richard stood, his composure finally fracturing. This is slander. You're making unfounded accusations based on coincidence and innuendo. Then let's move past coincidence. Victoria nodded to Marcus. Mr. Hayes, please present your findings. Marcus pulled out Wendell's tablet, connecting it to the boardroom display system. On screen appeared security logs, access records, system modifications spanning 18 months. Yesterday morning at 7:45 a.m. Your executive assistant, Patricia Fleming, accessed floor 12 security systems and disabled electronic locks on Ms. Langford's office, while making it appear locked on monitoring systems. That's absurd. Richard's face had gone red. Why would Patricia do that to create a scenario where I would enter Ms. Langford's office unexpectedly? Marcus advanced the presentation. At 7:43 a.m. Patricia sent a message to my work phone claiming there was a water leak in room 1247 that required immediate attention. She then deleted the message from the server, but system logs recorded the transmission attempt. This proves nothing. Richard turned to the board members. A disgruntled employee with unauthorized access to security systems is fabricating evidence to discredit me. Because I recommended his termination for inappropriate conduct. The inappropriate conduct you engineered. Victoria's voice cut through Richard's bluster. Last night you called Mr. Hayes at home and threatened that if he didn't resign voluntarily, you would ensure he lost his job and his daughter would lose health care coverage for her chronic medical condition. Would you like me to play the recording? She pressed play on her phone. Richard's voice filled the boardroom, smooth and menacing, making threats that sounded insane when played back to an audience. Make the smart choice, Mr. Hayes, for Isla's sake. When the recording ended, the silence felt absolute. Richard's attorney stood. I recommend we suspend this meeting immediately and reconvene after independent investigation. We don't need investigation. Victoria advanced to the final slide. I hired a forensic investigator to trace financial flows from the three consulting firms. She found 6 offshore accounts in Richard Caldwell's name containing $9.8 million deposited over 18 months. Withdrawals show personal expenditures including real estate, luxury goods, and cryptocurrency investments. The boardroom doors opened. 2 federal agents entered, their FBI credentials visible as they approached the table. Richard Caldwell. You're under arrest for wire fraud, embezzlement, and money laundering. One agent began reading Miranda rights while the other produced handcuffs. Richard's face had gone from red to white shock, rendering him motionless as steel circled his wrists. The board members sat frozen, witnessing the implosion of someone they'd trusted with the company's finances. Marcus stood at the periphery, no longer invisible, no longer dismissible. He'd crossed into territory where his voice mattered, where his evidence destroyed careers, where people in power would have to acknowledge his existence. Victoria waited until the agents had escorted Richard from the room before addressing the remaining board. We'll need interim CFO immediately and comprehensive audit of all financial systems. I recommend we engage external forensics firm to review 18 months of transactions, and I suggest we examine how security was compromised to allow this level of corruption. The board members began organizing recovery response, their shock giving way to damage control instincts. Marcus slipped out of the boardroom exhausted by adrenaline crash. Wendell met him in the hallway, having watched the proceedings on security monitors from the basement. "You did it, man. You actually did it. We did it." Marcus clapped his friend on the shoulder. "Couldn't have built the case without your tech work." Victoria emerged from the boardroom, her professional mask finally cracking to reveal exhaustion underneath. James Morrison followed, already on his phone coordinating with prosecutors. She walked to Marcus, and for a moment neither spoke, both processing survival. "Thank you." Victoria's voice barely rose above whisper. "For not resigning, for building the case, for saving my company from my own blindness. You saved my daughter's life 3 years ago." Marcus met her eyes. Debt works both ways. They left Apex Technologies together as evening settled into night, the building's lights blazing against darkness. Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from Isla, sent from Wendell's apartment where she was having dinner. "Love you, Daddy. When are you coming home? Soon, baby girl, very soon." He pocketed the phone and looked at Victoria. "What happens now?" "Now we figure out how to run a company honestly." Victoria's attempt at lightness didn't quite land, "and we figure out what we are to each other. I'm a janitor who just helped arrest your CFO. You're a CEO who drove my daughter to school during an asthma attack." Marcus shrugged. "We're people who help each other. That's enough for now." "Is it because people will say your world and mine don't mix?" "Maybe the world is the problem, not us." Marcus started walking toward the parking garage. They drove through Seattle in comfortable silence, Victoria dropping Marcus at Wendell's building to collect Isla. He climbed stairs, feeling lighter despite exhaustion, opened the door to find his daughter safe and laughing with Wendell's kids, and felt gratitude so overwhelming it threatened to undo him. Later, after carrying sleeping Isla home and tucking her into bed, Marcus collapsed on his couch with the strange sensation of having survived something that should have destroyed him. His phone buzzed one last time. Text from Victoria. "Thank you for today, for everything. I don't know what happens next, but I'm glad you're part of it." Marcus smiled, typed a response, and let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, some boundaries existed to be crossed. Isla's 8th birthday fell on Saturday, exactly 1 week after Richard Caldwell's arrest had made national news. Marcus spent Friday evening transforming their small apartment into Elephant Kingdom, hanging purple streamers and inflating silver balloons while Isla supervised from the couch. The decorations were dollar store modest, but Isla's excitement made the space feel lavish. She'd invited 15 classmates, and Marcus had spent his first paycheck since the board meeting on pizza cake and party favors shaped like elephants. Victoria arrived at 2:30 carrying an enormous stuffed elephant under one arm and wearing jeans that probably cost more than Marcus's rent, but somehow didn't look out of place. Isla screamed with delight, throwing her arms around Victoria's waist. "You came and you brought Elmer. Elmer, that's what I'm naming him. He looks like an Elmer." Isla dragged the elephant toward her bedroom while Victoria stood in the living room, suddenly the focus of every parent's attention. Kelly Morrison, the class parent Marcus knew from school functions, approached with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You must be Victoria Langford. I've read so much about you lately. The embezzlement situation must have been traumatic. We're focused on moving forward." Victoria's corporate polish activated like armor, and working closely with Marcus through all of it. Kelly's implication hung obvious. "It's wonderful when people from different backgrounds can collaborate professionally, though I imagine maintaining boundaries must be tricky when personal and professional lives intersect." Marcus intervened before the conversation could escalate further. Victoria, can I show you where we set up drinks? He guided her toward the kitchen, feeling the weight of judgment on his back. Sorry about that. Kelly means well, but she's protective of her territory. She thinks I'm slumming. Victoria kept her voice low, dating down for the thrill of authenticity before returning to appropriate socioeconomic matches. Are we dating? The question emerged before Marcus could stop it. Victoria met his eyes directly. I drove your daughter to the emergency room at dawn. I attended a board meeting that could have cost me my company. I'm at your home celebrating your daughter's birthday while being judged by every parent here. She paused. So yes, Marcus, we're dating, unless you'd prefer different terminology. The directness cut through weeks of uncertainty. Marcus felt something release in his chest. I just don't know how this works. My world and yours don't exactly overlap. Then we build new world, one that works for both of us. Victoria glanced toward the living room where children's laughter echoed. Starting with convincing your daughter's classmates' parents that I'm not villain in this story. The party resumed its chaotic rhythm. Victoria helped cut cake, supervised gift opening, participated in elephant piñata destruction with enthusiasm that slowly eroded the room's skepticism. By 4:15, when parents began collecting exhausted children, several had approached Victoria with curiosity instead of hostility. Kelly was among the last to leave. She paused at the door. I may have been harsh earlier. You seem genuinely invested. I am. Victoria didn't elaborate, simply stated fact. Well, good. Kelly's assessment of Marcus carried new weight. Emma adores Isla, and Isla's been happier lately. Just don't hurt them when this stops being interesting. The apartment felt larger after everyone left. Isla fell asleep on the couch, clutching Elmer, exhausted by joy. Marcus covered her with a blanket while Victoria helped clean up the domestic partnership, feeling both foreign and natural simultaneously. The following days established tentative rhythm. Victoria came for dinner twice, bringing groceries that appeared without Marcus having to ask. She attended Isla's school play, sitting through children's Shakespeare with genuine interest. She met Wendell's family, navigating his wife's cautious welcome. Slowly, carefully, she integrated into Marcus's life. But 3 weeks after the birthday party, Marcus noticed Victoria declining evening invitations, citing work demands. He recognized the pattern because he was creating his own version of distance, protecting himself against inevitable moment when she realized this experiment had run its course. They were pulling away from each other based on unspoken fears neither had courage to examine. Isla noticed. Why doesn't Ms. Victoria come over anymore? She's busy with work, baby girl. That's a lie. Isla's bluntness cut clean. Grown-ups lie when they're scared. You like her and she likes you, but you're both being dumb. It's complicated. Everything's complicated when you're scared. That night, 11:47 p.m. Marcus's phone rang with automated emergency notification from Isla's school. He ran to her bedroom. Isla sat upright, face contorted with effort of breathing, each inhale a visible struggle, lips carrying faint blue tinge he'd learned to fear. He grabbed her emergency inhaler, administered 2 puffs. She sucked desperately, but her breathing didn't ease. Marcus called 911. Then scooped Isla into his arms and ran for the door. The stairwell felt endless. By the time they reached the lobby, Isla's eyes had started closing. A car screeched to halt at the curb. Victoria jumped out. I was driving back from late meeting and saw emergency lights. What happened? Severe attack. Ambulance is coming, but she's fading. Get in. Victoria opened the rear door. I'll get her to hospital faster. They made Seattle Children's Hospital in 6 minutes. Victoria pulled directly into the ambulance bay. Medical staff responded instantly, rushing Isla into treatment. A nurse intercepted Marcus with questions he answered from muscle memory, while his mind remained frozen on image of his daughter's blue lips. Someone guided him to a plastic chair. Victoria sat beside him, not speaking, simply present, shared gravity rather than empty reassurance. A doctor emerged at 1:17 a.m. She's stable. Severe bronchospasm secondary to respiratory virus. We've administered corticosteroids and continuous albuterol. Her oxygen saturation is improving. She'll need observation, but prognosis is excellent. Can I see her? Of course. Isla lay in a hospital bed, oxygen cannula in her nose, IV in her arm. Monitors displaying reassuring numbers. Her eyes opened when Marcus entered, trying to speak through the oxygen mask. Shh, baby girl. Don't talk. Just breathe. Marcus took her hand. You scared me. She pulled the mask aside briefly. Ms. Victoria came. She did. Wild elephants couldn't keep her away. Remember, Isla's eyes drifted closed. Marcus sat holding her hand, while Victoria stood at the room's periphery, uncertainty radiating from her. You can come closer. Marcus gestured to the second chair. She'd want you here. Victoria moved to sit, her eyes fixed on Isla's face. When I saw emergency lights at your building, I thought, her voice caught. I thought I'd arrived too late again. The statement hung weighted with history. Again implied previous loss. Marcus wanted to ask, but the hospital room felt wrong for excavating old wounds. At 2:15 a.m., Victoria spoke again. I lost someone I loved 8 years ago. Car accident. I was supposed to meet him for dinner, but ran late because of board meeting. He was driving to restaurant when truck ran red light. By the time I got to hospital, he was already gone. I'm sorry. I've been alone since then. Not celibate, not friendless, but alone. Victoria's eyes remained on Isla. I convinced myself isolation was protection. Can't lose someone if you never let them become essential. Then I met you and Isla, and suddenly I'm terrified because you both matter. And mattering means vulnerability to loss. I swore I'd never experience again. I've been pulling away too. His honesty felt necessary. Convincing myself you'd eventually realize I'm just Janitor with nothing to offer except authenticity that stops being interesting. You're not just anything. Victoria finally looked at him. You're a man who raised remarkable daughter alone, who exposed corruption because integrity mattered more than safety, who makes me feel seen as person rather than position. And you're a woman who paid for strangers' medication while grieving your father, who drove my daughter to emergency room at dawn. Marcus moved closer. We're both terrified. Difference is whether we let terror stop us or move forward anyway. What if I'm not strong enough? Victoria's voice cracked. Then you fail and we figure out what comes after failure. Marcus pulled her into his arms. Love doesn't come with guarantees, only choices. I choose you. Question is whether you choose us. At 3:30 a.m., Isla woke briefly. Her eyes found both adults' face, relaxing into contentment before sleep reclaimed her. Mom told me in my dream that you deserve to be happy, Daddy. She said it's okay to love someone new. Doesn't mean you forgot her. Marcus felt tears break through his control. Baby girl, you can't know that. Yes, I can. Because Mom loved you, and love means wanting someone to be happy even when you can't be there anymore. Isla's wisdom defied her 8 years. And Ms. Victoria makes you happy. So stop being scared. Isla returned to sleep with finality. Marcus sat stunned. Victoria's shoulders shook with silent sobs. She just gave us permission, Victoria whispered. Your daughter just told us to stop being idiots. She's smarter than both of us. They sat entwined until dawn filtered through the window, illuminating space where separate griefs had found common language. Isla was discharged 36 hours later. Marcus took 2 days off work. Victoria came by each evening with dinner and comfortable silence that felt more intimate than conversation. The crisis had stripped away pretense, leaving only essential truth. They'd chosen each other. 6 weeks later, Apex Technologies held company-wide town hall. 800 employees filled the auditorium, anxiety evident in murmurs. Victoria spoke for 20 minutes about Richard Caldwell's fraud, new safeguards, clean audit results. Then she shifted topics. Corruption happened because we built culture where certain voices went unheard, where job titles determined whose observations mattered. That changes today, Victoria gestured toward Marcus standing stage left. I'm creating new position Chief People Operations Officer. This person will have authority to review any company process challenge, any decision advocate for any employee regardless of hierarchy. They'll report directly to me with complete autonomy. She paused. Marcus Hayes has demonstrated precisely the qualities this role requires. Integrity over convenience, courage over comfort, observation over assumption. I'm appointing him Chief People Operations Officer effective immediately. The auditorium erupted in applause mixed with confused whispers. Marcus hadn't expected public announcement. But Victoria was waiting, microphone extended. He walked to center stage. I didn't ask for promotion. His voice carried over the sound system. I asked for respect. There's a difference. Respect means listening when Janitor tells you HVAC is wasteful. Respect means valuing person, not title. Ms. Langford gave me that respect when I had nothing to offer except observations everyone else ignored. I hope we all give it to each other. The applause felt genuine. Marcus left stage to handshakes from colleagues who'd never noticed him before. After the town hall, reporters ambushed them. Mr. Hayes, are you and Ms. Langford romantically involved? Marcus looked at Victoria. She nodded. We're partners, in every way that matters, so that's a yes. Victoria took the microphone. That's a mind your own business. 18 months passed. Marcus transformed Apex's culture through employee councils with real authority, profit-sharing programs, on-site childcare. Victoria rebuilt board trust-positioned company as industry model. They moved into Victoria's penthouse together, keeping Marcus's apartment for weekends. Isla thrived with better schools, closer hospital access, her own room, with elephant-themed everything. On March 15th, 4 years after Rebecca's death and Thomas Langford's death and the pharmacy encounter that connected everything, Marcus and Victoria returned to St. Mary's. The pharmacist Harold Mitchell watched with confusion that transformed to recognition as Victoria explained. We'd like to establish fund, Rebecca and Thomas Memorial Fund, $500,000 to start for families who can't afford emergency medications. Harold's eyes widened. That's extraordinarily generous. It's payment on debt. Victoria glanced at Marcus. 4 years late, but sufficient to save other parents from impossible choices. They signed paperwork creating infrastructure that would outlast their individual lives. Driving back, Victoria posed question that had been building for months. The proposal happened same day in the pharmacy parking lot. Not elaborate, not public, just two people acknowledging debt that had become love. Marcus Hayes, will you marry me? He didn't hesitate. Yes. Isla ran from the back seat. Does this mean I can call you Mom? Victoria knelt. If that's what you want, I'm sure. I asked my real mom in my dreams and she said you'd take good care of us. Isla's certainty defied argument. So yeah, you're Mom now. Mom V. The wedding happened 6 months later. Small ceremony, 50 guests, rooftop venue overlooking Seattle. Isla as flower girl in elephant dress. Wendell as best man delivering speech about watching his friend transform from invisible to unstoppable. Marcus's vows focused on gratitude, Victoria's on dignity. They kissed while friends applauded and Isla shouted about finally having complete family. 2 years after that, Marcus stood in Apex's lobby where his transformation had begun. A young maintenance worker knelt beside coffee spill, carefully invisible. Marcus approached slowly. Hey, James, how's your day? James looked up, shocked. Chief Hayes, I'm fine, sir. Don't call me sir, call me Marcus. Marcus knelt beside him. That's not just mess, that's your work. It matters. It's mopping floors, not exactly saving lives. You're making environment functional for 800 people. Without you, building becomes unusable. That's not nothing. Marcus stood, extending hand. And if you have ideas about making this place better, come to my office. I'll listen. Thank you, Chief. Marcus. Just Marcus. He walked toward executive elevator but paused. James, one more thing. The work you do doesn't define your worth. Don't let anyone make you invisible. The elevator carried him to 12 to corner office he still felt slightly uncomfortable occupying. His desk held photographs Isla at 10 more confident than he'd dared imagine. Victoria at Isla's play, both laughing at shared joke. Baby on the way due in 3 months. Victoria appeared carrying coffee. You just mentored our newest janitor. Someone mentored me once. Marcus pulled her down to sit on his lap. Seemed appropriate to pay it forward. They sat looking out at Seattle, a city containing both poverty and wealth, but also containing people who'd crossed boundaries that existed only because society needed stratification, who'd chosen connection over convenience. Isla's school called. She made honor roll, and she wants you at career day next month. Tell her yes, but also tell her titles matter less than how we treat people with no ability to benefit us. Marcus kissed Victoria's temple. That's what I want her to learn. Not that promotion is goal, but that dignity is right. She already knows. You've taught her well. Victoria stood reluctantly. I love you, Marcus Hayes. I love you more. Alone, Marcus pulled out the old prescription bottle from his desk drawer. Isla Hayes, age 4. Albuterol inhaler filled March 15th. 2021, 11:17 p.m. 4 years since stranger's kindness had saved his daughter and set everything in motion. 4 years since he'd been invisible, struggling, certain survival was the most he could hope for. His phone buzzed. Daddy, can we get ice cream after school, Mom? V said yes if you approve. He smiled at easy integration. Of course. Homework first. Deal. Heart emojis, then elephant emoji because some obsessions never fade. Marcus returned bottle to drawer among quarterly reports. Physical evidence that success wasn't about climbing ladders but making sure everyone had ladder to climb. That being seen mattered more than being promoted. That walking through wrong doors sometimes led exactly where you needed to be. Outside his window, Seattle continued its rhythm. People working, struggling, loving, surviving. Some visible, some invisible, all human regardless of paycheck. Marcus had learned that lesson through threat and terror and slow realization that respect was currency more valuable than money. He'd walked through the wrong door and found the right person. And if that wasn't proof the universe occasionally got its arithmetic correct, nothing was.